The Vor had been in Pen 7 for 11 months before anyone sent me in. That wasn't an accident. 3 handlers before me had gone in during the first week. Full protective gear, 2-man teams, shock poles charged and ready. The first team lasted 4 minutes before the boar put its front 2 legs through the reinforced gate, and they scrambled back out. The second handler went alone because he had something to prove, and he came out missing the top half of his left ear and carrying a look in his eyes that never quite left. The third team didn't go back after the initial assessment. They filed their report, non-compliant, elevated aggression profile, containment-only recommendation. And Doc Boss Sevrath let the thing sit there and eat automated feed drops through a slot in the wall. 11 months. The Vor paced the pen, and everyone on Veldera 9 pretended it wasn't there. I was cargo superintendent, not a handler. My job was manifests, crate weights, loading schedules for the outer reach hauls. I'd been doing it for 19 years on 6 different stations, and I was good at it in the way that quiet, unremarkable people are good at things, steadily without drawing attention. Sevrath had never liked me. I was older than him, didn't move fast enough for his taste, and I had the habit of correcting his manifest errors in writing, which meant there was always a paper trail. So when the automated feed system for Pen 7 threw a mechanical fault, and someone had to go in with a manual drop, Sevrath put my name on the order. He told me it in front of the loading crew. He was smiling slang when he said it. I said, "All right," up the feed crate and went. The pen was at the end of sub-level 4, past the cold storage bays, past the equipment lockers, past the last stretch of corridor where the overhead lights had been flickering for 6 weeks, and nobody had fixed them, because nobody wanted to be that close to Pen 7 after dark. The door was thick alloy, triple sealed, with a small viewport at eye level. I stopped at the viewport first. The Vor was at the far end of the pen, all 6 legs folded beneath it, obsidian plating across its back, catching the pen's amber work light. It had its 6 eyes open. It was watching the door. I keyed the manual release and went in. The smell hit first, something between whetstone and ozone, sharp and clean. The Vor didn't move. I set the crate down about 4 meters from the door, cracked the latches, and started laying out the feed blocks in a line the way the care sheet said. I wasn't thinking about the Vor specifically. I was thinking about the mechanical fault log I needed to finish before second shift, and whether the crate count on Bay 12's outgoing manifest matched what I'd signed off on 2 days ago. I heard it move when I was halfway through the blocks. Not fast, deliberate. Each of the 6 legs placed with the kind of careful weight that told you it knew exactly how much force it was capable of and was choosing not to use it. I kept laying out feed blocks. It stopped about 2 meters to my left. I glanced over. It was watching me the way a very old animal watches something that interests it. Not hunger, not threat assessment. Something slower than both. "Right," I said. Which is what I say when I don't have anything better. "Go ahead." It lowered its head toward the nearest block and ate. I finished the rest of the row, stood up, and wrote my times in the log on my wrist unit. The Vor finished the blocks on the left side of the line and moved along to the next ones. When it reached the far end of the row, it turned around, walked back toward me, and sat, or the closest thing to sitting that a hexapedal ambush predator with a carapace like hull plating can manage, settled its weight down, tucked 4 of its 6 legs under, and regarded me with all 6 amber eyes at a range of about 1 meter. I looked at it. It looked at me. "I have to come back tomorrow," I said. "Mechanical fault may take 2 days to clear." The Vor blinked, not all 6 eyes together. They moved in a slow rolling sequence, outer to inner. And then it put its chin on the floor between its front legs, put its head at approximately my knee height, and exhaled a long breath that rattled the feed crate behind me. I wrote that in the log too, finished my notes, and left. I found out later that 4 members of the loading crew had watched the whole thing through the viewport. Sevrath had been one of them. I went back the next day with the feed crate, and, the day after that, when the mechanical fault clearance took longer than expected, and the day after that, because by then, the care sheet had been officially reassigned to my name, nobody had told me otherwise. The Vor stopped watching the door when I came in and started watching me directly, which I took as a reasonable sign of progress. By the end of the first week, it was following me through the pen, while I did the feed run. 6 legs moving at my pace, which meant it was moving well below any speed it was capable of. It started staying closer. I started talking, not because I thought it understood, because the pen was quiet, and I had a habit of thinking out loud when no one was around to hear. The day it lay across my legs, I had been sitting against the pen wall, finishing a manifest correction I'd brought down on my tablet. The Vor had been behind me. I could feel the floor vibration of its breathing. And then the vibration got very large and very close, and then I had approximately 400 kilograms of hexapedal apex predator distributed across both my legs and the lower half of my jacket. It was warm. The plating on its side was smoother than I expected. I finished the manifest correction, sent it, sat there for another 40 minutes until it shifted, and I could get up. I did not tell Sevrath about that part. Someone else did. He called me into his office 3 days later. He had the look he got when he'd figured out he had leverage. Leaning back in his chair, fingers loose on the desk edge, voice careful and easy. He told me there was a cargo discrepancy on a Keth Voral haul, a significant one, and he needed a superintendent's sign-off on the corrected manifest before the inspection team arrived from Outer Reach Authority. The correction would bring the numbers in line. The fact that the numbers were wrong, because Sevrath had been running unlicensed weight overages for 7 months, did not appear in his version of the situation. He told me that the Vor's containment permit came up for renewal at the end of the cycle. That renewal required a behavioral assessment from the station's cargo superintendent. He told me he'd be very interested to know how I planned to file that assessment. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said I'd think about it, and I went back to work. The next morning I brought the feed crate down to Pen 7, keyed the door, and found that Sevrath had been there before me. The viewport on the outside had a fresh smear on it, the kind you get when someone has been pressing their face to the glass for a while. The Vor was already at the door when I came in, which was new. It waited while I did the feed run, then followed me back to my usual spot against the wall. Sevrath came down to sub-level 4 that afternoon. I heard her in the corridor before I heard him at the door. He walked heavy when he was confident. He had 2 of the loading supervisors with him, which I understood was meant to establish something about witnesses. He keyed the viewport open and called through it. He had papers in his hand, the manifest corrections. And he told me through the grill that I should think very carefully about where I wanted to be at the end of this cycle, and that some animals on containment permits had accidents when the paperwork didn't go the way it needed to. The Vor had been beside me. At the sound of Sevrath's voice, it stood up, all 6 legs, full height, which put the top of its carapace well above my head, turned to face the door. I watched all 6 amber eyes fix on the viewport, and I watched the low, continuous sound it had started making travel through the floor, and up through the wall, and into the bones of anyone standing close to it. Sevrath stopped talking. I heard one of the loading supervisors take a step back, then another. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The Vor held its position at the door for a long moment. The sound building, the floor humming, and then it turned around, walked back to me, and settled its weight across my legs again with the patience of something that understood, on a level well below language, that the question had been answered. Through the viewport, I could see Sevrath's face. I filed the behavioral assessment that evening. Vor stable, non-aggressive toward designated handler, suitable for extended containment permit renewal. I filed the manifest discrepancy report with the Outer Reach Authority inspection team the same night. 2 separate documents, both accurate. I heard Sevrath had a difficult time with the inspection. The Vor didn't know about any of that. It knew the feed schedule, and it knew the sound of my boots on the sub-level corridor. And by the end of the 2nd month, it knew the particular quiet of me sitting against the wall with a tablet and nothing interesting to say. That was enough for it. I think that was the whole of what it had ever been looking for. Something that came back the same way every time, without a shock poll, without a performance, without anything to prove. 11 months in a pen, and all it had ever needed was someone ordinary enough not to be afraid.